Good day, dear listener. I hope to bring you an entertaining experience with this fictional story. If you like this content, please like and subscribe to this channel. Please see the description below for links to my other published works. This reading has been written and narrated by Joya Chantry. All copyrights reserved. This selection was written for the purpose of being read on YouTube by the author. No others may use this material in any way without written permission from the author or their subsidiaries. An ebook copy of this collection will soon be available for sale on Amazon.com and Kindle Unlimited. Please be aware this is part 2 and the conclusion to the legends of witches and dragons. You may wish to listen to part 1 to understand how and why Serafina is in the uncertain situation she is now facing. For now, sit back and enjoy the adventure. The Legends of Witches and Dragons, Part 2. Written and narrated by Joya Chantry. That night, Serafina didn't sleep in her own bed, but the bed of a woman that was said to be a legend, to live in the footfalls of a woman that held power unlike anyone else known to exist, held a weight of importance greater than anyone without magic running through their veins could ever begin to understand. It was almost like she could feel the deep connection to the woman, and still she had nothing to teach her of what this great witch was like. Time swallowed up so many things that it was hard to know fact from fiction. It also meant that what she wanted may not even exist. If she took the time to discover the truth, then it wouldn't hurt her too much. But then again, there were those questions simmering in the back of her mind that burned to be answered. Sera wondered if she should ask her host if he minded her snooping around his ancestral home, looking for secrets that no one in this time could be sure even existed. The man did hint that he wanted her to find the great witch's workroom and develop her magic here. Maybe this was her way, and she didn't need to ask his permission. Then again, she wasn't sure how any of this worked, considering that he had admitted to being the king of dragons and someone that could turn into a dragon. Dragons. That was one thing her magical studies hadn't taught her about. How the world could dragons survive without being exposed to the world? She couldn't imagine that a huge, flame-throwing dragon wouldn't be noticed. With the progression of the world, it was nearly impossible that dragons hadn't been spotted in some video or picture. Witches, on the other hand, were riddled throughout time and history. You could look up witches in a million different historical books from all over the world. While it wasn't until the 1990s that witches were not seen as evil, it was still one thing most true witches kept to themselves. They didn't expose themselves to criticism if they could avoid it. That was how she grew up. Her mother and father always told her to keep her gifts a secret. Now, she had to question if their reason for her hiding her powers wasn't because of who she may have looked like. To breathe a new image of a revered witch that was steeped in legend and prophecy was intense and riddled with importance. When people came to know that she was born a witch that held her own magical identity, that thought had Sera pausing as she finally processed the reason why all those men had been asking her to have their child. They knew or suspected that she held a great power and earth-changing magic. Last night's tour of the castle had been one she never thought to have experienced in her life. From the outside, the place looked run down and terrifying. But once you were inside, it was nothing more than wealth and luxury in abundance. Old money was covering every inch of the place. And it wasn't long before Sera found that she wasn't the only guest of this magnificent castle. There were others that had been brought here, and some like her that had been taken from their lives. It seemed that Killicross was well skilled in the subtle art of kidnapping without being caught. Like her, most that had been brought here didn't mind remaining after they understood the reasons they needed to be protected. Killicross had insisted that she kept her path and intention here secret. He told her that even those within the protection of his people were still vulnerable to greed and misguided paths. He had given her one more clue before allowing her to rest for the night. Her bloodline could be traced back to the great Queen of Magic, and she was the only living blood of the famed witch, considering her brother was truly only her half-brother. It meant that she was the only daughter of her mother's blood. It also meant that if her brother didn't know the truth, he would find out when things began exposing themselves. Walking down to the dining room, Sera found herself mesmerized with the endless works of art covering every wall. A part of her almost dreaded the work it would take to clean every single painting and portrait hung around this massive castle. She had seen the army of maids and footmen, but she still couldn't believe the massive amount of work that it took to maintain a place like this. A voice broke into her thoughts. The paintings are protected by a magical spell that keeps them from dust and damage from the sunlight, and they do not need to be cleaned. Turning to see the woman walking up behind her, Sera inquired, "How would you know that?" "I've lived here for a while. The place is heavily coated in magic that helps to keep it safe and reduces the amount of work for its upkeep. And the outer grounds are cast in a spell that makes the place look and feel uncomfortable for everyone. Without magic, it's a protection spell that was said to have been cast by the Great Queen while She's lived here. From what I have read, the spell is said to have been cast in such a way that for as long as the dragons reside within the walls of the palace, they will be protected from all outsiders. Sera looked at a woman no older than she was, and who was dressed in a fancy blue velvet robe, like she imagined from a Harry Potter book. She hoped that wasn't the fashion expected around here, because she wasn't the biggest fan of Harry Potter. The fake magic just didn't hold to the real work she could do. The fantasy of a school that taught children magic? Now that was a concept she had wished for all her childhood. The magic she held and practiced was the real deal and not the dreams of other people's fantasies. She could move things with her mind as long as she could see them. She was very well practiced with her potions and chants. She could draw fire from anything around her and manipulate it to do anything she desired. The magic that she held was real and not a game or something she took lightly. Another voice joined them. So you found the newcomer on her first day? Should we be worried, Cross? Sera didn't look behind her at the two now talking about her. The woman, Cross, answered with a bit of amusement. She's not much, but look at her. Killicus will enjoy this. The legends are going to be reawakened before we finish breakfast, the guy whispered. Sera laughed to herself at their childish views on her and her magical doppelganger. It would be a real treat when she unlocked her powers and everyone, including her, found out just how strong she would be as a full-blooded witch. If Callicrates was right and she found the secret chamber of Seraphina Kardrak, this place would be filled with rumors that would never end. The guy asked a question that she wasn't going to answer. Do you know her name? No, she's not said much. Just how I know of the histories of Tovella Dragona. She's the dangerous ones are always quiet. Grasped in tone, like she knew the dangers surrounding Seraphina. When they were in the dining hall, she saw the other 20 or so occupants sitting around eating. The moment one person looked at her, the first gasp at her appearance was made, and within seconds the room was silent. The silence had Sera freezing in her tracks until she heard Killicrat's voice behind her. She is not the Great Queen, and you may stop this now. Seraphina is here to unlock her powers before she returns to her life outside Taval Draona. I will warn all of you to leave her alone, and not ask of her resemblance to the Great Queen of Magic. Seraphina's knowledge of our world is limited, and that is all you need to know. Sera looked to the man standing next to her before asking. They are all going to say it, aren't they? He smirked as his eyes trailed over her, as his rich voice sent chills coursing through her. Yes, but with respect and restraint. Join me for the meal. She took his arm as she walked with him to the head of the table. Slowly, people began talking again, but their words were hushed, and she knew they were speaking about her. It seemed that for the first time in her life, she was being noticed as more than a quiet lump in the corner. All through school, she did her best to exist without ever being noticed. And now, she was the star cheerleader of the school. She almost wished that she could go back home and hide in her little bookshop where nearly no one noticed her. It would be nice to slink away in the middle of the night when she could tell all these nosy people to leave her alone. She didn't like attention, and this looked like a developing nightmare of her being forced into the spotlight that she had run from all of her life. You do not like the attention? Callicrots asked from the head of the table where they were sitting. Sera's answer was a mere whisper. No, I was raised to hide myself away from the world. To protect your magic and identity, I'm sure. Now you are facing a world that will know your existence as a prophecy that you never asked to be a part of. He finished for her. Sera nodded as she saw the eyes moving from her to the people around the table and back to her. It was the most uncomfortable thing to experience. Still, she was sure that being here was safer than being at home, or in that little cottage she was planning to hide in for the next few weeks. At least, there were people here that told her they would protect her. His voice was soft as he explained a question she had yet to ask. Those here are all witches. There are 79 dragons that reside within Tavol Drauna. They are all warriors that are protecting the grounds and watching over the land. You will meet them as the days pass. You need not fear, Seraphina. You are well protected. She looked to the food on her plate as she whispered, I want to look around, but... You may move within Tavilla Draona at your will. You have no bounds inside our walls. I only ask that you remain until the time we discuss. He answered softly. She looked at him, almost afraid to ask, If I find... It is yours without question. As I have said, you hold a deeper power within you. Once you have unlocked your magic, I see nothing that can harm you. Until that day is reached, do not share your power with anyone, not even me. He instructed her to the one thing she was now growing to see as a theme with him. Seraphina spent the whole day alone walking around the castle. She looked at everything she could. The artwork was amazing. And not just the paintings, but the sculptures, metalworkings, and things she never thought could or would exist outside a museum. In one wing of the castle, There was a whole Viking Age ship hanging from the ceiling, complete with its original shields, oars, sails, and weapons. She knew that archaeologists would die to get their hands on. It seemed that witches were a part of the Vikings, just as they were a part of the rest of history. The next morning, Sera woke with an eerie feeling that someone was watching her. A strange voice whispered around her, and even in the wee hours of the morning, she knew she had to get up. Standing, the image of a woman was hovering near the door, encouraging. The dragon holds the key. Go to the dragon. Either she was crazy or she was seeing ghosts. Either way, Sera was following the image in front of her because she was curious. She dared to ask it. Are you the great queen of magic? The ghost smiled as she heard the whisper. You are. The words trailed off as the ghost floated through the stone. With the need to follow the thing, Sera slipped on her shoes and walked out into the hallway, where the ghost was drifting to the last room in the long hall. She knew creeping around at night was wrong, but the Dragon King had given her permission. She wasn't thinking as she walked into the room where the ghost had disappeared. For some reason, she hadn't thought about why the heavy wooden door would be closed at this hour, or why she shouldn't walk through the barrier. The moment she stepped into the room, she knew her mistake. The dark room held an almost identical layout to her own room. The difference was that this one held a man sleeping in the bed. A man she knew would not approve of her walking into his private bedchamber in the middle of the night. The deep breathing that had been coming from the bed changed as she tried to walk out the way she came. The door behind her refused to open, almost like it had been locked behind her. It didn't make sense as she turned around, trying her hardest to force the door to open before the man in that bed caught her sneaking around his private chamber. Sera screamed as a set of arms wrapped around her as she realized her deepest fear was coming to get her. How did you enter this room? The door! I'm sorry. She didn't want to admit that she had followed a ghost into his bedchamber. His warm hands wrapped around her stomach as he pulled her into his warm, hard chest. That door has been locked for hours. She didn't know what to say because she had walked through the door. If it was locked before she walked through it, then she may have walked through a solid door. And the thought had her shaking inside. What the world was going on around here? She was seeing ghosts in the night, and walking through solid objects. And now she was in the arms of a very sexy dragon that had her thoughts going to more unconventional paths. Serafina, why are you in my room in the middle of the night? His smoky breath was now tickling her senses. Closing her eyes, she admitted, I, I, I was following something. A spirit guided you through the door to my private chambers. He hummed in her ear. All she was able to do was nod her head as he pulled her in a little closer. Are you aware that dragons' senses are heightened after our first chain? We can smell the emotions of everyone around us. It is the reason no one can sneak up on a dragon. That had her shaking her head as she realized that he was telling her that he knew exactly what she was thinking, down to her dirtiest, darkest thoughts. His lips brushed her flesh just under her ear as he purred. I know this was not your intent this night. I will open this door, but know that I will not lock it again. The next time you walk through the door like this, I will not allow you to walk out with such ease. She felt his rough, wet tongue drawing circles over her sensitive flesh, sending waves of lust coursing through her as he teased. The next time you come into my room in the dark of night, I will teach you the secrets of my dragon. I will show you how deep a dragon's heart can ensnare a witch's soul. If she wasn't terrified and humiliated by what had happened, she would almost tell him that she wanted to know his secret right now. The only thing holding her back was the idea that something had led her into this room, and she had just walked through a locked door without realizing it. How in the world had she opened up to him like this as he pressed her body to respond in ways she never felt in her life? In this moment, she wanted to let go and see where this would take her. But the idea that she had been able to walk into a stranger's room through his locked door had her shaking inside. How had this happened? How could this happen? She watched his hand reach for the door as he put a key into the lock. There was no questioning this now. This was a very old door, and the only way it locked and unlocked was if you held the key. So how was she able to walk through the door like she did? And without knowing she was walking through a door? It didn't make sense. Still, she was positive it had happened because she could feel the sultry man holding her like she was his lover. He nipped the sensitive flesh at the base of her neck before pulling the door open and whispering, "Go back to bed. Your options are stolen from you. And no more wandering in the night, for the next person you come by might not be as understanding." The moment the door cracked open, he removed his arm from her. In that split second, she almost wondered if she should turn around, find out just how a dragon would taste, as he wrapped her up in his arms and carried her to his bed. That split second had her heart pleading to let him in, as she felt the rational side of her screaming and telling her to run from the large, dangerous dragon. That was the side that reminded her of all the reasons that you did not play with dragons, and why they were dangerous creatures that should have her running in fear. Sera let her rational side take hold as she rushed back to her room and slammed the door behind her. Leaning with her back on the door, she hissed, "Why?" The translucent woman standing next to her began laughing. Of all the humiliation she could suffer, it had to get worse by a dead woman taunting her like this. It wasn't enough that freaking ghost had led her into the dragon's room. No, now it was laughing at her. Sera stormed to the bed and threw off her shoes as she climbed back under the nice warm blanket. She doubted she would fall back to sleep after that, but she refused to get out of this bed before she saw the sun peering into her window. She didn't care that there was a ghost standing around, taunting and teasing her. She didn't care that there was a dragon man that held her naughty mind's focus, as she pictured him doing things to her she had only seen in the movies. Her humiliation was deep, so deep, that she hadn't considered moving from the bed even after the sun had risen. It was almost worse knowing that she would be forced to face the man at some point in her day. She could only pray that no one else knew of what had happened last night. Maybe he was a gentleman and wouldn't tell of her naughty night tramping through walls and locked doors into places that ought not be traversed. Sera waited until it was almost 9 before she left her room. Most would have taken their meal and headed to one of the workrooms or gone outside by now. She hesitated as she walked into the dining hall, where only 3 people were still seated. 2 were ensconced in a conversation. The other was sitting in his seat at the head of the table, looking straight at her. Yes, this day was going to be worse than going to her first day of high school in a new country and without knowing the language. She saw Kilocrat's gesture to the seat next to him, and she had a feeling it wasn't a suggestion. He wanted her to sit with him and discuss what happened last night. The one thing Sera wanted to forget ever happened. Without a way around this, she sat next to him as he asked, "You slept well?" "No. Apparently your castle is haunted," she grumbled. That had the guy down the table looking at her as he corrected. "The Villa d'Arma has no known ghosts, spirits, or any other afterlife living within its walls. There are spells that prevent them from taking residence within the grounds." Sera gave him a hate-filled look as she snapped, "I take it that is written somewhere with all the other strange mysteries of this place?" "Yeah, and it's the reason I live here. If I leave to Villa Draona, then I am plagued with spirits, casting demands on me. This is the safest place you could ever find yourself." The guy stated like it was law and not suggestion that ghosts did not enter this land. Sera didn't argue as she began nibbling on her food. When the other two had drifted out of the room, she heard him ask, "You saw a spirit that guided you in the night?" "Guided, humiliated, haunted, and tormented me until the sun came up? Yeah, you can say that. And apparently, it taught me how to walk through solid objects too, because I'm not sure how you explain that one." She didn't say the words they both knew. She had walked through a locked door and into his room while he was asleep. He laughed with her temperament with the night's events. "It is interesting. I don't know of any witch to hold the power to walk through stone walls or solid oak doors." "Not even your beloved Queen of Magic?" She threw out the sarcasm. "No, I know of nothing to say she possessed that ability," he answered with a hint of amusement. She tried to calm herself before she said something that would get her into trouble with this man. All she wanted to do was hide and run from here. What came out of her mouth was far to the contrary. "Is the room I'm in haunted?" "I wouldn't know. You're the first to use that room since..." "She died in that room, and now I'm seeing her freaking ghost," Sera accused. He laughed. "No, she passed away in the dragon's lair, where her body was cast to pure stone and remains to this day." Sera grumbled. "Then I'm just crazy." "I cannot help you with that, but I can assure you that no one knows of the night, and no one will as long as you are quiet. What happened was unusual, and I will look into it today. I would suggest you take a walk outside and experience the grounds while the weather is nice. It will be good for you to familiarize yourself with the space you will be working," he suggested. That had her nodding. "Fine, but you may wish to warn everyone that I'm not in the mood for their questions today. As you have surmised, I didn't sleep well, and my mood is showing through." She didn't know what he told the others, but no one had bothered her all day. Walking outside did help to some extent, but it was short-lived when she heard the two dragons having a crude conversation about her. Clearly, they didn't know she could hear their dragons talking, but she did, and their words had only fueled her anger and desire to leave this place. By the time her night had ended and she was able to sneak up to her room, she had more than enough to consider leaving and never coming back. A part of her wanted to abandon her goal of unlocking her powers, now that she had a taste of what a life of witchcraft could be. She didn't like the idea of always having people around her thinking they could do what they wanted to her and judging her for not holding up to their expectations. When she closed the door to her room, the whole experience started again. She saw the strange ghost woman standing next to the window, looking down to the dragons below. It seemed she was not going to have another day of rest as long as she was here. Letting go of her sanity, Sera muttered, "How can you exist, even when everyone claims that ghosts and spirits cannot enter the grounds?" The ghost floated to the bed and sat down, waiting for her. Sera walked over to the bed, looking through the ghost as she waited for her answer. To her surprise, the ghost replied, "I am the one who set the spell to keep all others out. I found that this land is now my prison, bound by the magic I created to protect those I love." "So you are Queen Seraphina?" "Yes, and so are you. It will be easier if you just accept him now. With the acceptance of this dragon, your solstice will be easier for you. This dragon will be permitted to stand at your side through the whole of the ritual, and the stress of unlocking your gifts will come with ease." Sera was unsure of this, but she didn't let that stop her as she demanded, "Why are you haunting me?" "I am not. This was my room long before it was yours," the woman pointed out. Taking this another way, she asked, "If I am you, then how can we both exist together in the same time?" "You are not me, child of my blood. You are the next to take my place on this world. The only reason you are not learning is that you hope I will tell you all my secrets." The ghost looked back to the window, and Sera almost felt sorry for her. "May I find your workroom and grimoire? I will not do it without your permission." Sera tried to be reasonable with the spirit that was trapped here. When the ghost looked back to her, Sera could see the remorse. "I will tell you my secrets if you do something for me. To know the powers I once possessed, you must accept the dragon into your body. Take him, and I will guide you through the ceremonies and induct you into the life you were born to live." "There's only one ceremony," Sera pointed out. "Take the dragon and take his heart. The dragon ceremony needs to come before your powers are unlocked. If it does not, then you will never feel your powers come true. He needs you to fill his heart as you need your magic to fill yours. It is the spell cast, and one that must be fulfilled. Your mother refused me this, and for her reluctance came her early death. A witch without her full powers unlocked is bound to death with great pain and agony. You have 2 nights to choose your fate. Take him now or leave, and never know your true magic." Sera didn't have the chance to open her mouth before the ghost was gone. Clearly, she was being given time to think about what little choices she needed to make. Take a dragon as her mate, even though he was an absolute stranger to her, or she could follow her mother's path and have maybe a decade before she died. It was a truth she had hidden from everyone. Her mother's diary had told her of her choice to refuse the dragon and her failed attempt at unlocking her power. Her mother had found a random single father to seduce and share a child with. Sera was her last dying wish to continue her bloodline and continue their magic. Just the memory had her heart pounding as she wondered what she should do. Sera heard the soft thud from the man's boots as he walked past her bedroom door. The sound of the door clicking shut forced her mind to think about what she needed to do. More to the point, she needed to find answers, and he seemed to be the one that would have them. Sera knew this was wrong, and she got up and went to his door. This time, she knocked and waited for him to answer the door. She wasn't going to fall for walking in on him a second time. When he opened the door, she knew he wasn't surprised to see her standing there. "Sera?" The most important question she held right now came out in a rush. "What is that dragon ceremony?" "It is a binding of the dragon with the heart and soul of his destined love." The simple answer was the one she dreaded he would give her. Taking the last of her courage, she admitted, "She told me that my mother came here and failed to unlock her magic. She said that for me to unlock my magic, I need to be guided through the dragon ceremony before I unlock my magic. If I don't, I'll just die like my mother did." Kilocrats nodded. "I know." What? What do I do?" She gasped as her knees began to buckle. Before she could catch herself, he had scooped her up in his arms and carried her to his bed. Taking a moment to process this, she watched as he closed the door and turned back to her. His look told her so much more than words could ever express. He could see and speak with the ghost of the dead queen just as she could. "She speaks to you." It was an accusation that he did not deny. "Yes." Sera asked him again. "What do I do?" "It is your choice. You may undertake the tasks before you, or you may refuse them and leave after your ceremony fails." His words were flat and toneless. She had a feeling that if it were up to him, the course of events to follow would be the same as she had expected when was brought here. No, when he had kidnapped her and brought her here. "You kidnapped me because I'm supposed to be your wife?" The words came out a gaspy, shocked admission that he didn't deny. "I want you to make this choice. I refuse to do this with you. It is not my place to force magic that is not wanted." His words ripped at her heart. Sera fell back on the bed as she looked up the elaborate embroidered dragon watching those on the bed. Things were just getting worse as she muttered, "Why?" "Sera, I will not require you do anything." "No, but if I ever wish to live for more than a decade, then I don't get a choice. I can do as my mother did and rush to have a child that I will only share my life with for a few short years before I die. Or I can accept a curse that has been plaguing my family." Those were her only options, and she knew it. His words were closer as he agreed. "It is still a choice you must make for yourself." "And if I don't?" She wondered how that would play out for her. His answer wasn't helping her. "It is the same as refusing your magic." "And if I do?" she asked, knowing she had so little of a choice in this. Again, his voice was closer as she saw him standing next to the bed. "Then you will be the happiest woman alive, as was Queen Seraphina. I will show you the love you have dreamed of all your life, as you grow into the magic you were born to control." She saw him sit next to her as she asked him, "Will it hurt?" He laughed as he laid next to her. "No, you will enjoy everything we share, and the magic that you were born to possess. Your life here is only beginning if you accept this." Sera whispered, "I don't want to end up like my mother." "I will not force this." She knew what he was not saying in that moment. If she wanted to continue, then she would be the one that needed to start this with him, with his dragon. Biting her lower lip, she wondered what it would be like to be touched by a dragon. He will only come out when you need him. Do not fear more than what is before you. That had her snorting. And you do not believe I'm more afraid of you than a dragon? He chuckled as he leaned in and kissed her. It was her first real kiss from anyone other than her family. It was strange, and at the same time, it woke those feelings she had been fighting all day. It was like her body knew what it should do, even though her mind was fighting against it. His lips brushed against hers as he whispered his smoky breath into her parted lips. Tell me you want this. Tell me you're ready for us to be together. She didn't know why she felt like he had won this, but for once she just stopped thinking about everything else in the world and let herself dream. For once she was going to follow her own path and tell the world to bow to her. She was going to take the King of Dragons and never let him go, because it was the one thing she had wanted the most since the first time he had walked into her little bookshop. Screw it! I'm taking the dragon and sexy hunk and never going back to that bookstore again. I want my life and adventure. She hadn't even realized she said the words out loud till he began laughing. It is good to know, my queen. His words came just before their lips met, and she didn't need him to say the words that were swimming inside her mind. She was going to take the place of the Queen of Dragon and Magic. Sera was going to be the next ruler of magic, and she embraced the dragon, now kissing her and loving her. All her dreams and fantasies would come true now that she had a dragon to love, her magic to unlock, and the power of the world at her fingertips. This is the end of Sera's tale. If you like the story or would like to hear more, then like and subscribe to this channel and leave me a message in the comments. In the description will be a list of my past works and a few hints of what is to come. For those who read my books, please note that YouTube will not permit my normal content. The works on YouTube will be spiced down dramatically to meet with the rules of this platform. I hope to see you in my next mini love adventure. I still have several more dragon shifters waiting to make their way to your imagination.